just shot an IL-2.
Oh shit!
Oh my god, yeah.
Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. My name is Dark Death 5000, aka Death. Today's video I'm just going to be showing you how to set up my custom tank controls with the manual transmission on the PlayStation 4 controller. This will also be part 2 of my latest controls video series. So I just did part 1, my playing controls. And one of the defining points behind these controls is so I can jump back and forth between the tanks and the planes with a sense of familiarity and also without actually having to switch presets. So my plane and tank controls do work nicely together, and you don't need to create separate presets for them. They all operate under the same single preset. So if you haven't already, I strongly recommend going back to the previous video and watching the first part to this video. If anything, just so you get a better understanding of how these controls work. You know, even if you're not necessarily going to be playing the planes, it will just give you that additional knowledge. So I'll post a link to part 1 in the description below. Also, one final point before I get into the actual controls. I just want to say I'm not a great tanker by any means. I still have a lot to learn. So what I'm about to show here is not necessarily going to be for everybody. These controls are just what I have found to work for me. If anything, I advise you to watch this video first and then go off and experiment with some ideas of your own. So, tank controls. What exactly have I got going on here? So, if I bring up the controls menu here, and I'll just break this down into sections and I'll also do a short demonstration at the end. So, the first major change I've made here is I've put L1 as the throttle. So, if we open this up, there's no longer an axis assigned, so we have no axis assigned here. I've completely done away with the throttle on the right stick, so it's just a simple tap and hold to move forward now. If you're familiar with my playing controls, this is going to be the same as pitching the plane up, only in tanks we're instead just moving forwards. Now, one thing to note here is I don't actually use this min value. I mean, I may as well get rid of that. So I don't bother with the reverse, so the minimum value, which is reversed. I don't bother with that at all. And the reason for that is I'm actually using manual transmission here. So with manual transmission, it's just like in real life. You go ahead, select reverse gear, and you then throttle up to move backwards. And I have the gears assigned to the right stick, up and down, so I can just flick the stick up and down to change gear. And I'll admit, the gears are not going to be for everybody. You know, this offers both pros and cons. The pros are you're going to have more control over your speed. You can slow down and potentially get your shots off faster. And the cons, on the other hand, you're going to be much slower when selecting reverse especially. But just in general, you're going to be a lot slower because you're actually having to manually change up all the time and change down. But yeah, I suggest everybody at least gives the manual transmission a go. Ultimately, it's going to come down to how you play the game. You know, if you're somebody that likes to play stealthy, use cover such as buildings, rocks and the hills, in my opinion the gears offer a huge advantage to those kind of play styles. Otherwise, you're probably just better off sticking with automatic transmission because, like I say, this is going to slow you down considerably. If you do opt for the automatic transmission, I do have a toggle set up here. So I have direction pad up assigned to toggle between the automatic and the manual. Just bear in mind there is no reverse throttle assigned with this, so you will need to set something up there. I would suggest L1 plus down or something like that. or you could even just get away with putting the throttle back on the right stick up and down. So you can set it up there. But again, it's really up to you and how you want to play the game. This is just how I play. So steering, this is mostly going to be default behavior. Basically, I have the steering on the right stick, left and right. I have the axis inverted. You know, tracked vehicles, everything is the opposite, so that's inverted. And the rest of this should be default. I may have just changed the non-linearity here and the dead zone again, but that is pretty much it for the steering. Brakes. So this one is optional. I have the brakes set up here with a 50% correction value, and this basically means the brakes are always going to be on, with the exception of when I'm holding the throttle or steering left or right. So essentially the min values here, so L1, the right stick left, the right stick right, they're going to release the brakes and actually allow me to move. Otherwise, in other words, if none of these are being pressed or held, the brakes will be bound on again. And we also have an axis set up here just to make this work. I've set this to the left trigger, which is something I use for binoculars, so that's what that's there for. And ultimately it's just going to stop you much faster than the default controls would. So it removes any delay with the braking. And again, this is really going to come down to whether you use the manual or the automatic transmission. For the manual transmission, it offers a huge advantage since you can stop faster, and if you actually combine this with the gearing, you can almost remove the turret wobble entirely. On the other hand, if you are using automatic transmission, it's honestly going to create more problems than anything at all, since there's no reverse, and for starters we've got this correction set up here, so you can only assign 3 min values here anyway, so you couldn't put right stick down in there. So my suggestion, if you are using automatic, just skip over this one. And it is the same with the right brake, just in case you're wondering, so it's identical. Pull aiming mode, so if you happen to be playing vehicles which lack a movable turret, you can actually set this up and your tank will automatically follow where you position your turret without you actually having to touch the steering, so that can be really useful. When I'm not playing these, I don't bother assigning it, but if I was to play one of these, I would go ahead and assign that to the R2 button. I also have the engine, turn on or off the engine here, set to square. So moving on to weaponry, there's no real wrong or right way of setting this up. I have my cannons and machine guns set to R1. I have the secondary on X, and my special guns are also on X, and that's really all there is to this. Smoke grenades I have on X plus square, so I press both these together to activate the smoke. Next bullet type, I have this on circle, and this will basically just go ahead and switch between your shell types. Again, I'm not going to bother with the radar at this point, we're already short of bindings as it is. Obviously, if you wanted to set this up, you could use the multi bindings, so you know, you've got X as an activator there, kind of a shift key. You've just got so much you can do really, but I'm not going to be covering that at the moment, just because it's more when you get into higher tier vehicles. So I'm just focusing on low to mid tier here. Zoom camera, So this is on R2. Not really much need to say in that, it's just going to zoom the camera in. Sniper mode, so this will actually bring up your turret sight, and I have that assigned to the left stick pressed in. Binoculars, very important in tanks. This will actually give you the raised view of everything around you. Essentially it's the commander's view, so when he pokes his head out of the tank you're actually seeing his view of the battlefield. And really you should be using this at every opportunity you get in battle. I have the binoculars assigned on L2 here, so I can just quickly tap L2 and that will bring up the binocular view. Zoom axis, again I have this on the right trigger, R2. I don't know why I have it twice here, but we'll just go with that. So the right trigger for the axis. I do have a correction here as well, a negative correction of 50%, just to ensure the zoom is always off when I'm not pressing that. And that is really all there is to the zoom. View in battle. So as a rule, I don't usually bother with this one, but in tanks, I just find it helps with looking around, especially on the move. It can be really useful for just looking around corners and things like that. And I have it set up on the D-pad left and right, so the direction pad, and I use relative control. And I also reset it with X. It's not perfect, I'll admit, but once you get used to tapping the direction pad, it's almost like using a hat switch on a joystick. And like I say, you can just use it to look around corners, so it is quite useful to have. Again, it's going to be optional, it's not necessarily needed. Certainly if you're short of bindings, you could skip over this one. Aiming, so this is going to be mostly default behavior again. Obviously I've just moved it over to the left stick, and I've removed any dead zone here and the non-linearity as well. So again, I prefer to run my non-linearity on the linear form, so that's 1, and same with the dead zone, I prefer to remove that completely. And that is really all there is to the aiming. Same with the y-axis, only it's going to be set up on the left stick up and down. And again, that is going to be it for the aiming. Controller aim acceleration, so if you missed the first video, this is actually a kind of aim assist on the controller. Essentially it slows down our inputs and accelerates them over time, so the longer we use this, the faster it's going to move. The longer we aim, the faster and more sensitive it's going to be. I like to have mine maxed out in tanks, since speed is not really a big deal in tanks. It's more about being precise and being able to make those accurate shots. If you do want to reduce the sensitivity further, you can just go ahead and increase this delay value here. Suspension, I won't be bothering with suspension at this stage again. Like I say, we're short of bindings as it is on the controller, and these are far from essential anyway. Really the suspension doesn't come into it until you unlock the modern vehicles. Repair, so I have this assigned to triangle. Basically if you get crippled in combat, you just go ahead and hold triangle to start repairing, and that's all there is to it. Same with the fire extinguisher, so I have the fire extinguisher set up on triangle as well. And if you want to use the menu, so we don't have any of these bound here, but if you want to use these, just tap and hold the touchpad for the event selection menu, and that will allow you to selects them on the radio menu that appears. Active scouting, so basically in the light vehicles, light tanks, you are able to play as a scout vehicle, so you can kind of reveal enemy positions to your friendlies and just mark where they are. So I have this assigned to R2 and R1, so if I'm in the turret site and I'm firing at somebody, that is automatically going to spot them as well. Also, if I zoom, that is also going to spot them. So I'm just trying to make use of the bindings here. Rangefinder, same again, just making use of the bindings, so whenever I aim down the sight, so L3, that is going to activate the rangefinder. Again, when I fire or when I zoom, that's also going to activate the rangefinder. Sight distance control, so I have this set up on the left stick, up and down. I enable it with the square button, so I tap and hold square, and I can adjust the sight distance control by moving the left stick up and down. Obviously you want to set this to yes for the keep value for disabled axis. I've inverted it to make it easier to adjust, and it's also in relative control. And these values here are really just personal preference. And that is basically going to be it for the tank controls. And not too complicated really. The main things are the throttle, the gears and the brakes. Like I said, the rest is really just up to you and how you play. I will just go over the common tab quickly. So I've already covered this in the planes, but just briefly. So we have the map on down, the statistics, so the scoreboard. If you want to check who's alive in the game and all that stuff, you just press X plus right. Leave the vehicle, not really something you're going to be using in tanks, but yeah, I've got that assigned to X plus left. Same with the X-ray, not really something you're going to be using, especially since you have the constant view of the tank here and the damage you've got. So that is mainly for the planes. A lock target, mainly an arcade mechanic, so if you're aiming at somebody, you aim down sight, and that's also assigned to the L3 button, so it's automatically going to target them as well and lock them up. Chat, like I said in the first video, I have a wireless keyboard in front of me, so I prefer to use the keyboard for the chat. So I've got that set up on the return key, so the enter key, and also switch chat mode is assigned to the keyboard, so that's tab to switch between team and all chat. And artillery strike for on the tactical map, so this is for tanks obviously. So when you select the artillery strike with the touchpad, so you tap and hold the touchpad to bring that up, select the artillery, and you can then call it with R2 or X. You can also toggle the artillery aiming mode from the map view to the third person view by pressing square, and for any reason if you want to cancel that, so if you want to cancel the artillery, you can just press circle to back out. And that's really all there is to it, to be honest. You know, again, like in the first video, I've opted to move my pause menu to X plus options, basically so I can make use of that options button for the team chat. So if we scroll down, I have the radio messages for team set up on the options button. Oh, and they also fixed the mouse look activation in tanks. So if you recall in my last tank controls video, this was broken in tanks. You couldn't use the mouse look activation with the left stick. So you will be happy to know that they've actually fixed that now. So if you set this up to your X button, just like in planes, you can tap and hold X, and that's going to turn your left stick, the stick usually used for aiming, into like a Freelook camera. And it's very useful because it automatically recenters when you let go. So you don't need to set a key to reset it or anything like we have with the viewing battle. And it's just really useful to have, so that's something to note there. But yeah, that is really going to be it. Just have a quick look here, but I think I've covered everything. Yep, so that is it. So I will just jump in a quick test drive just to give you a quick summary of how this works. So I'll take the Panzer 4 out here. This is why you should always come into test drive when you're finished. So apparently it's complaining that I don't have the min value set up, so I'll just go ahead and set that up to L1 plus down like I suggested earlier, and that should fix it. Yep, appears to have. Right, so I'll go over the throttle control first and the gears. So automatically we're in automatic mode now. There's no manual transmission, I'm just pressing and holding L1 to move forward. And I generally use this at the start of the game, just to get to the cap point or to a advantageous position, something like that. And then once I'm in position, I will press up on the D-pad, and that will put me into manual transmission. So if you look at the left, bottom left now, I can change up and down by flicking the right stick. So in neutral, it's not going to move at all. Put it in first, and I'll go into this crawl speed. And like I was saying, it makes your turret really stable, so you can actually fire on the move like this. Put it in second gear. And it's just so stable. Obviously when you go up the gears it's going to be a bit of wobble. But let's say you just wanted to slow down quickly and take this shot, so you can drop your gears. And it removes a lot of the wobble you would get with the default controls. So that's really handy to have. It just means you can get your shots off that much quicker and potentially faster than they can. So it could be, you know, it could keep you in the game, that kind of thing. It reverses down on the right stick. So from neutral you just press it down once and that puts you in reverse. And the brakes, when you let go of L1, that is going to stop you dead. So I'll show you that by getting some speed up. So if I let go of L1 now, that's going to stop me immediately. And that is really all there is to the gears. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's just really getting used to it. And the other side is every single tank is going to be different. So some tanks have more gears. They have higher gear ratios, for instance. So you're just going to have to get used to it. And like I was saying, if you want to switch to automatic at any time, you just press up on the D-pad. The main problem with actually switching between the manual and automatic transmission is when you find a tank unexpectedly, it might surprise you and you occasionally will forget which mode you're in. So a few times I've forgot I was in automatic and I've tried to reverse and that's got me killed. So if you are going to use this, I suggest you stick with either one. So you either go with manual or automatic and just forget the other. But yeah, that is really it. You know, if you want to see any more example gameplay, I will be posting tank gameplay on the channel soon, so keep a lookout for that. But yeah, that is it. So thanks for watching as always. I hope this helped, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel, it helps me, it helps everybody because this stuff gets out there faster. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.